morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever it is, wherever you are. It's Monday, so it's already pretty it's pretty early.
JP's already tired. Look at that, sitting on the corner.
Yeah, imagine that. Who could have guessed?
Hard weekend.
It has been because during the week my kids are home from school. And they're just busy. I mean, I have fun with them, but man, they just kill me. Like, my son is all into like electrical circuits and stuff, so we got these little snap circuits for him. Imagine an electrified set of like snap buttons, like for a coat. And so we found a set this weekend, and this set, unbeknownst to me, had a siren in it, an electrically activated siren.
Bad move.
So I was sitting upstairs and I heard it, and I knew he was down here in the basement playing with it, and I was like, well, at least it's like having a bell around his neck, so I know if he's in the house or not. Turns out he wasn't in the house. He left it on and ran outside and was playing with the neighbor, which is fine. I mean, whatever. It was nice out, but
So he's a smart kid if he can work on the art of distraction and deception there.
already at 7, he's already way smarter than I am. So it's only a matter of time.
Ferris Bueller style, right? He pretends to be home while he's outside partying with his friends.
Yep, pretty much. Although we then knew he was outside because we heard the screaming as they drove there. They have these little things called plasma cars. It's basically like a sled with wheels, and they go all the way up to the top of the cul-de-sac and they drive it down, and then they sort of hit the bump going into our driveway, get a little air, and then continue down. And then there's a hill that goes all the way down to the backyard. So you can usually hear the screams as they hit the various leaps off of it, and I thought, I guess he must be outside. And sure enough. Mm-hmm. But it's okay. How's your weekend, Mr. Matskas?
We spent it outdoors. We didn't do anything around the house. We spent it with the 2 friend families that we have, which are coming in 1 year of anniversary after the lockdown. It's been our closest company that we had, and it was good. The weather was okay. It was cold, and the kids had fun. We got tired, but it was good because they fell asleep straight away, which was not an issue. We caught up on. We started season 2 of For All Mankind, which is amazing. But I didn't realize that they release 1 episode every Friday. Damn it! And I was going to binge watch it, and I can't because I have to wait now. Why? It's like 80s TV. Why would they do that? I expect everything to be available. Anyway,
well, you gotta tease it out, like WandaVision there, right? Like, I don't know if you're caught up or not, but there's 1 more episode left, and it's like, what's gonna happen?
See, I haven't started it yet. I want to, but we just haven't gotten to it, and now I'm kind of like.
It's so good. Stay off the internet because
Okay.
you don't want any spoilers.
I hear people talking about it. I'm like, okay, I can't. I have to just scroll past this tweet. I don't want to read what they're going to say because I don't want to ruin it. But it looks so neat, and I really like watching Paul Bettany too. And so I was pretty keen to watch it. It's like by the time you put kids to bed, it's like, okay, well, I can go to bed or I can watch TV and be tired all day tomorrow. Which one do I want to do? I guess I'm just going to have to find like a weekend and plow through the whole thing.
Well, the episodes are only half an hour each, so they're not too bad to binge through, and I kind of wish there was more of it. But
Yeah.
very well done, I thought.
Well, that's cool.
I've noticed lately. I force myself to stay up later at night to catch up on the stuff I couldn't do during the day, and it seems that the sentiment is the same for a lot of people. Like you do all the other things that the only time left to you personally is like late at night, and you sacrifice sleep just to have to do the things that you want to do.
Yeah, we just got, what was it, five extra days to take off. And it's like, you know what I'll do? Take 5 days off and just work those days and just clear the meeting calendar. There are no meetings. Like, I can actually get some work done. I love, like, the 42 minutes of work that I get to do every week on actual things outside of sitting in meetings all day.
Yeah.
So,
Well, technically
anyway.
Wednesdays are no meeting days, so we should be monetizing on that.
I only have,
Anyway.
like, 5 meetings on Wednesday. Problem solved, right? But they're just with nobody. With nobody else. It's like, let's have 50 divisions all take a no meeting day on different days, and that way somebody's at least not having a meeting.
I don't think DevDiv has a no meeting Wednesday. At least I never got that memo.
See? So, yeah. So anyway, so this morning I haven't even introduced yet. Sorry, my apologies. This morning we've got Claire Novotny here from the .NET Foundation, the executive director of the .NET Foundation. We're super excited, super pleased to have you. So, how was your weekend, Claire?
Oh, well, thank you for having me. It was good. I think we got some of that Seattle weather out here. I'm in New York City, so it's we got the 40-degree overcast rain drizzle thing going, and so I hear you were in 75-degree weather, and Christos was outside, and I'm quite jealous.
So sorry for that.
No, it was nice this weekend. I mean, it rained all last week, and it was cold, and then it got really warm late in the week, and I thought, well, and the problem is we live close to a lake, so our backyard is a soupy mess for like a week after it rains. And then it was really nice yesterday, and now today it is raining again. So, I just can't get a break. I can't get enough dry days to get the whole backyard dried out enough that you don't sink when you walk back there.
Be careful what you ask for. Be careful what you ask for, because it will get very warm very quickly, and then you'll be like, "Oh my God, it's too hot. I can't be outside."
Oh, don't worry. I'll complain within a month. Within a month, it'll be too hot in here. I'm like, oh, it's so hot here. God, I hate this place. I want to move away. So, whatever. But anyway, so it's Monday. We do have Claire.
It's an exciting week, right?
So we should probably talk about. Do you want to talk about .NET at all today? I mean, given
What's
our
this
guests.
.NET thing? Is that like a domain?
It's a new thing. It's a fab, apparently. Everyone apparently is talking about it. I don't know why.
Yeah, I see people tweeting about it all the time, but the problem is that nobody spells it the same way, so the hashtags are never correct.
Yeah, there's this, .NET or it's spelled out. Yeah, and then I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think the true canonical way to do it is to spell DOTNET. Because imagine telling somebody that you're going live on live.net, and you're like, wait a minute, what just happened?
Well,
I don't know what happened.
We have our website, .net or something.
Yep.
See, that's right. So Claire, tell us a bit about what does an executive director, or the executive director, sorry, what does the executive director for the .NET Foundation actually do?
Well, so I think I consider myself mostly like a cat herder. So, I'm trying to coordinate and set the direction of what the foundation should be doing. But really, I work for the board of directors, which are elected by the public, by the foundation members. And I'm trying to basically be the scrum master. What are people working on? What are they doing this week? Are there any blockers? Can I unblock it? Can I help coordinate? And trying to make sure that people are not blocked on the things that they might need. Or if there is something that they need to get done, I will help take care of it. So it's really like the conductor of an orchestra, or, just herding cats, really, when you have a all volunteer board who are graciously donating their time to work on these things. But it is that. I mean, it's trying to get folks to move together in a direction and, have things have things get done in the end.
Yeah. Well, as soon as you said cat herder, I thought, oh, it sounds like an agile coach, and I guess those two things go together. Sort of like apparently
not
like
far from the truth.
apparently like me and complaining about the weather, according to Mr. Robertables in our chat this morning. So what exactly does the .NET Foundation exist to do? Like, what is the point of the foundation? Like, what are the goals?
So the point of the foundation is to help foster a healthy ecosystem for the .NET open source community. And that's intentionally broad because it can encompass many different aspects. Certainly there's the whole idea of the maintainers and the open source authors, which is a vital part of the ecosystem. I mean, without libraries and without healthy projects, there wouldn't be as many things to use. The other end of it, there's customers, there's people trying to build applications, whether it's companies or students or anything. We need to try and make sure they have the resources to get started or have the ability to use the open source libraries within their companies. And while open source is certainly more common these days, and virtually every company is using it, there's still a lot of old school thinking in many of the companies where there's a it must come from Microsoft or we can't use it.
Yeah.
So one of the things the foundation strives to do is work with those companies and work with the maintainers and the ecosystem to try and figure out, all right, a healthy ecosystem is that. It's an ecosystem. It can't just be Microsoft. So how is it that what we can help companies take dependencies and use other projects and contribute back? So it's not just a one-way street.
Yeah.
We also work on fostering outreach efforts to support a huge Meetup Pro network. I think we have 360 or 370 meetup groups in 70 countries last I checked. I think touches nearly 300,000 members worldwide. So we pay for all of those meetup groups so that people who are interested in running those groups don't have to worry about, well, how am I going to cover that?
Right, yeah.
Yep.
So
We also just launched a speaker directory. So Ineta used to have a speaker directory to help connect conferences and user groups to speakers who are interested and had different expertise. And now the foundation just recently launched that on our website this last week, I believe. That the big launch was, we had a soft launch prior. So lots of different things.
yeah, so it sounds like that's a whole lot. So like I've been .NET for a long time, and I know what the foundation is in I guess in a sense, but I had no idea of the really the sort of broad strategic portfolio of stuff that has to be done. I mean, so you've worked either for or with Microsoft for a long time, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you had looked at, say, 10 years ago, right? The fact that this was maybe even 15, I don't even know how long it's been now, but if you were to have thought that this sort of change could happen, I mean, how do you feel about what's happened over the past decade in terms of .NET and foundations and open source and the whole world that we live in now?
Oh, it's completely night and day. And, I actually did work at Microsoft about 10 years ago. I was in a field role selling Visual Studio Ultimate to enterprise customers here in New York. And that was the thing where it was all about, trying to show, Visual Studio and the premium offerings there. And, yes, it's my favorite IDE. I love it. But .NET, this was also the time of .NET Framework and Silverlight. And all of
The
those
glory
things,
days. Yes.
and Windows Phone.
What?
Let's not forget that.
Oh wait, it's Thursday. Too many throwbacks for not to be Thursday. This is crazy.
But all of these technologies were closed source. I mean, if you wanted to debug any framework code, you had to find it and step in, and you really couldn't. ASP.NET MVC was early on in its days, and it was one of the first products to be open source by birth, and I think was leading the way in that field. Mm-hmm. But by and large, Microsoft was a closed source company. It wasn't there yet. Fast forward, and I think the announcement that this .NET Core, when in 2014, when it was announced that this .NET Foundation was coming and that .NET Core was going to be this open source thing, a lot of people were surprised by that. I think they also wondered, is that going to really happen? Or is that going to be let's throw the code over the fence and, it's going to get, obsolete? But I think the company and the team has, over the years, pivoted, and all of the development is done out in the open.
Yeah.
I'll take that to the current .NET 6, where you can see for the first time the planning is taking place earlier and earlier out in the open. You can go to themes of .NET and see the high-level epics that the teams are set to work on. Now, that's not every little bug fix and every feature. There's certainly going to be other things along the way, but these are the high-level things, the parts that are going to be in the .NET 6 product. And if you think about where that was 10 years ago, I mean, I don't know if people would have believed it if you told them this was going to happen.
Yeah, it was completely opaque. And I didn't know that MVC started out as an open source project, or at least with the intention of it becoming an open source project one day. Like that's news to me. I didn't know. And I don't know. Like, .NET feels like it's in transition. Like, it feels like the transition period started back like when .NET Core was first sort of announced. It was going to be this whole sort of rethinking of .NET and run on anything, and you could use all sorts of sort of newer development paradigms. And it feels like it's getting closer to that. It feels like it's getting closer to the end of that transition period, but it still feels like a transition, which not a bad one per se, but just that things are every year. We're seeing newer things in a totally different direction, I guess, in terms of sort of 10 years ago, I bought Visual Studio and it came in a box, like with posters. In fact, I even think I still have some of my ADO.NET data access posters floating around here, and XML web services namespaces. And it came in a box, and God help you if you didn't work for a big company, because if you did and it didn't work, then you must be doing it wrong. And now now everything's sort of all out in the open. The only sort of painful part right now is that it seems like all of the sort of, I don't want to call them past sins because that's probably mean, but there were so many things that were happening, .NET Framework of WCF and ASMX and all these things that were going on all the time, that now, sort of enter into .NET Core, and it's like, well, there's not really a UI story in 2014 yet because it's cross-platform, so what are we going to do? So now things are transitioning more, and it seems like now we're very close to sort of this like completely turnkey, I can go build an app for nearly anything, and I can do it in .NET. And it feels like it's
the goal. It's .NET everywhere. I mean, it's everywhere you want to be, right? Did I just steal that from some like American Express or something?
Or sue us, one of the two. Either one's fine.
But it does work everywhere. So actually, we have everything from the watch, your TV, your phone runs Xamarin or runs .NET really. It runs on your desktop computer. It runs on massive computers up in the cloud. It actually runs on microcontrollers too. So there's a project called .NET Nano Framework that is a community project that it evolved from the .NET Micro Framework. So this is a case where Microsoft had this micro framework for a while, and for various reasons, it kind of just the priorities went elsewhere, but it was under an open source license. And you had a group of folks that picked it up and modernized it and continued to maintain it and turned it into this thing called the .NET Nano Framework. And it's a full-on subset of the .NET API that is designed to run on tiny embedded systems, like less than a megabyte of space and memory, microcontrollers. And that's all part of .NET. I mean, it's the same technology skill set that you have where, one day you could be writing something on a microcontroller, another day you could be writing a web service, another day you could be writing something on your, to run on your TV and leverage that code base and the skills.
Yeah. No, it's awesome because I think, I remember years and years ago, like when I was in school, we did a lot of Python, we did a lot of Java. And that was the whole promise of Java. And I don't know if anybody's ever seen like a Java desktop UI, but
I'm guilty for, sorry.
You had to mention that, didn't you, JP?
I'm just saying, like, I'm not
there.
I'm not trying to be mean. I'm just saying that a Java desktop UI, yes, it worked everywhere, and that was totally worth it. The fact that it would run on my Windows machine and also something else was totally worth the fact that UI-wise it absolutely made my eyes bleed. I mean, whatever. It is what it is. Not being mean. Just, it is, that's what it was. But I'm kind of curious. So there's... I asked the question the other day on Twitter. I said, hey, like, if I'm going to build a .NET desktop app today, like, what do I do? And I got a great answer from Dimitri Lyland. The problem was it took 3 tweets to answer it. And I was still sort of like, okay, so I have a billion options, essentially, is what it comes down to. And maybe this feels like a very sort of Microsoft problem anyway, which is there doesn't seem to be a really prescriptive way to say, okay, cool, if you're going to do X, then here's a good place to start. And I totally get, you got a billion people that are using stuff, so you can't be super prescriptive, but it feels like, at least from what I hear from people that we talk to, more prescription tends to always seem to work out better, because the people who know, they know, like, okay, yeah, this is prescriptive, and so, like, parts of this I can take and parts of this I can't. And the folks who are brand new have they've got something they can use to go from sort of zero to app. Anyway, the reason I'm asking that is, if you were going to build a new desktop app today, what would you use? Like, whether or not it's cross-platform and all that, I mean, that's cool. It doesn't necessarily need to be, but if you were going to choose one, what would it be? And this is totally for my own personal knowledge, because I'm curious.
So I have to say this. I am a XAML girl. I do not like HTML and CSS. Like, it's just not my thing. So my choices are going to be based on what the XAML technology stack is going to look like, but that may not be everyone's cup of tea. So for example, we just announced that .NET, that Blazor will work on the desktop in a cross-platform way, which is really awesome. I mean, again, if you're a web developer and you know HTML and C#, you can build a really cool Blazor application and it'll work on a website and now as a native application. However, as you said, we have choices. And now if I'm a XAML developer, I have options between, say, .NET MAUI, which will allow me to write applications for Windows Desktop and Mac and iOS and Android.
And I think Linux is coming as well, right? At some point. Is that correct?
I don't know. Scott Hunter on last week had basically said on Linux there's nothing stopping us. It's just a matter of demand.
Right.
If you look at the numbers and the market share is so small, but if there's a demand for it, we can build it.
Yeah.
On the other hand, there's also things like Windows UI. I mean, Microsoft's a large company. You have Windows UI coming from the Windows team, which is the new set of Windows native controls, and you can build that using C++ or .NET coming, as part of the WinUI stack. And one of the things that I love about open source is that we have third parties like Avalonia who have a XAML stack. It's similar to WPF XAML, but not exactly the same, that are based on Skia, and I believe it's Skia, or GTK, and they are cross-platform on Linux and on Windows and on Mac, and you can have an application that works that way, that it's very graphics heavy. They're good at that. And then you also have platform Uno, which is based on the WinRT, WinUI technology stack. And in fact, their goal is to be code compatible with WinUI. And what they're awesome at is you can put XAML on the web via WebAssembly.
Oh, nice.
So that's the thing that I've always wanted, where I'm saying, well, I don't want to write my HTML, but give me a XAML, give me a grid, give me a stack panel and all this stuff, and data binding, throw that on the WebAssembly. And then it also, like, Uno supports desktop and mobile platforms as well. But, really, XAML on the web is really what has me super interested in that technology.
Yeah, because it doesn't require, it's WebAssembly, so it doesn't require any sort of plugins or anything. So it's sort of like it's Silverlight for the rest of us.
You said it.
With the good parts only, right? With the good parts.
That's right. The best parts of Silverlight for the rest of us. Yeah, that's true.
But that's why we have choices. I mean, and that's what's great about having the open source ecosystem too. I mean, we have .NET MAUI, which is being done as it's open source. It's out in the open. It's from the .NET team. And you also have Avalonia, which is a different open source project. And we have the Uno platform, which is another UI stack. So we have several open source UI stacks on the .NET platform that all have, different features, and you kind of can look at the parts. Oh, and of course Blazor. Use the one that makes sense to you, that fits your needs and the skill sets you have.
But okay, let's think about that a little bit. This is great. I mean, choice is always good, but at the same time, as a developer, do you feel that we inundate people with too much choice there. Like if I am going to build a desktop app, what is the prescriptive way? What does Microsoft recommend for me to do? What's the technology that will be future-proof for the next 5-10 years? So I don't have to rewrite, because the WPF still runs, WinForm still runs. Obviously, they only run on Windows, so that's a requirement. Like if I have to run across platforms, maybe that's something I need to think about. But even for cross-platform desktop UIs now, I have so many choices that, again, who is going to tell me which one is the right one, right? Like, do we have this kind of almost like a guidance for developers to follow as a workflow that says, if you're building X, this is what you need, but if you're building something else, then this is the technology that we recommend? Because developers need this kind of guidance usually.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're working on some of that. There's certainly .NET Learn, which is on .NET/Learn, and has a bunch of learning content. There's also content being put out by, on LinkedIn Learning and Pluralsight from various MVPs and other really sharp folks who are putting together courseware to help people learn.
Yep.
There's also a set of .NET 101 videos on the website that help people kind of get started and figure it out. I don't know if we have much in the way of the UI story on that 101 series, but I know that's something we would be looking to add shortly.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it seems like most of maybe not most, and this could be a gross simplification, but a lot of the UI story feels a lot more comprehensive now, like in .NET 5 and .NET 6, than say a little bit earlier on. Like if you were listening over the past couple of years, I don't think there was necessarily a great do this kind of a story, but it sounds like now we're getting much closer to really targeting all sorts of different devices, regardless of the UI that you need to build.
Yeah.
I mean, part of I think the challenge here is, yes, we have several technology stacks. We have WPF and WinForms and Blazor and Maui, or .NET Maui, and are you going to ask us? We're going to say, yeah, use Blazor, use .NET Maui, use WPF, use Windows Forms. But that's asking a vendor, you're asking Microsoft for their opinion, which is valid, of course. I mean, Microsoft is the expert, or one of them. But I think that's also one of the things we're trying to do as the .NET Foundation is grow this to say, look, there's other options out there that are very well supported, that have rich UI stacks and rich features. Is it up to Microsoft to say, go use Avalonia here, or go use Uno? Should that be from the foundation? Should that be from the community to put out learning content that we can amplify and show? Yeah, I think it's kind of going to be all of the above.
Yeah. No, that's an interesting way to put it, because I'm still kind of curious. Like, what's sort of the relationship between, say, .NET Foundation and Microsoft and like the .NET team? Like, obviously, there's a lot of people work together, but I mean, this is sort of wholly independent, right? This is a wholly independent group, and it's run by the directors or run by the board through you. And I guess in some cases it seems a little, and again, this could just be the fact that I'm old and the neurons don't fire as quickly as they used to. It takes a while for things to spin down the drain. But so, sort of historically, there were things like Java and even newer things like Node and things like that. And they are, like, .NET's always been a Microsoft thing. It's been a Microsoft product. It's been owned and shipped and sold and supported by Microsoft. I guess not sold, that might not be the right word. But is there, I mean, it almost seems to be reaching that sort of state in the maturity level where it's like, okay, cool, now .NET is truly an open source thing, and it's going to sort of split away. Like, we end up doing a lot of work in .NET and setting a lot of direction of .NET, because historically, who else would have, right? It was closed. So is that sort of like, is that a change that we'll see more of, where it is more sort of externally driven in terms of maybe not direction, but in terms of community-sponsored training content, community-built training, community-built sort of systems as a whole?
That's definitely one of the core parts of the foundation, is to try and encourage and enable people to deliver that kind of content. And if you want to create it, if there's something we can do to help, we will. We'll help promote it and highlight it and help people discover that this thing is out there. We are working with the Microsoft.NET team, and full disclosure, I am the executive director of the foundation, but I'm also a member of the .NET team, and I kind of wear two hats in that respect. And I always try and be careful of which, hat I'm wearing at any given point. But the foundation is a different legal entity. I work for the board. The board tells the foundation what to do. Microsoft does not. Microsoft is a corporate sponsor, so they donate, money like many others, like Amazon and Engine and VMware, Octopus Deploy. You can look at our website. We have in Platform Uno, just recently started as a corporate sponsor. We have a terrific set of corporate sponsors that help our operational costs, but we don't set direction. We don't control the project. That said, we do have a technical steering group that the corporate sponsors get to participate in, where the product team joins in on a regular cadence, and we'll review and work on theme documents, much like the theme documents that the .NET team puts together internally to help with planning purposes and drive direction. So it's an opportunity for the community to engage with, or the corporate sponsors to engage with the product team and kind of help set direction and say, hey, there's this area of the platform we'd like to see more. We were thinking about doing it this way. Here's some proposals that we want to take forward and iterate on and see where we can go. And that's a fairly new process. We're just kind of at the beginnings of that, but the goal is to get more of the planning out in the open, to communicate that more with the TSG, the technical steering group members, earlier on, to both get feedback to react to it earlier, and to solicit proposals from the TSG that we can incorporate or that other community members can help us deliver on.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think.
Nice.
I think it's it feels like it's part of the step of the journey, and so for individuals who want to be involved either in, maybe not necessarily in specific types of discussions, but to be involved in terms of contributing, or be involved in terms of sort of nurturing that open source ecosystem, contributing packages. Like, how does the .NET Foundation, do they take packages sort of under their umbrella for things like, like, I don't know, so financial support or promotion or things like that? Like, what kind of services does the foundation offer to like an individual or small team dev?
So projects can apply to join the foundation. And the foundation is looking for projects that are, notable and crucial to the community, that can help, that are widely used within the community. We have no specific set standards. It's not like we're looking for, you have 300 stars on GitHub, or 10,000 or 100,000 downloads on NuGet. But the project committee evaluates these to basically ask the question, what would happen if this project disappeared? Is it, that kind of question, how trying to weigh and make a call on that. And we've accepted, I think we're at 120, 130 projects to date. And for the projects that we support, we have a lot of back-end services to enable the ordinary bits that most people just don't want to have to deal with, but are important to a crucially running project. Like contributor license agreement, no one wants to think about it. Nobody likes licensing.
Yeah.
However, having a clean license hierarchy is vital to a healthy project, so that companies are able to take dependencies on it without fear of some lawsuit coming to bite them, down the road, which is would prevent adoption. We also provide things like advanced build infrastructure. So while Azure DevOps and GitHub Actions have a lot of free options today, which are way more than when the foundation first started, we have faster and more build agents for projects that need it. So There's a project that we're working with that their unit tests take, 45 to 50 minutes per platform per architecture, so Linux, whatever. And when it takes that long on the standard agents, and we said, look, we can run it faster. Let's just put faster VMs up there, and now we can cut that down to 25 minutes or less if we want.
Yeah.
We can provide those on an as-needed basis based on project needs. So we don't have any hey, everyone gets this, but you can come work with us and we'll provide resources for that. We also provide code signing certificates to all projects because we require all of our projects to be code signed. It's part of basic security hygiene to make sure that binaries are identifiable and traceable back to their origin and aren't tampered with along the way. And we require projects to follow secure supply chain best practices so that the binaries can be audited back to the original source code that built it in case of an untrusted build infrastructure. So it can help mitigate the potential damage of a future SolarWinds style attack going forward.
Yeah. That's been an interesting thing over the past few weeks, especially. Not to mention over the weekend when their executives threw their interns over the bus. So that was.
Don't do that. We all know it wasn't the intern.
Yeah, it sounds like to me like an intern with access to any sort of production system. So it's more like free labor than an intern, but Okay, so on the topic of licensing, I do have a question. And I guess it's more sort of ecosystem, like the broad open source ecosystem, not necessarily .NET, but I imagine .NET's going to end up here too. So things like Mongo and Elastic, and there have been at least 4 or 5 big projects. They've all sort of started looking at this shared source, or SSPL, I think is what shared source, shared source public license. And it's sort of jokingly called the Amazon license, right? Because somebody goes and takes it off the shelf and they turn it into this, they turn it into a service that makes a ton of money. So I'm always curious to hear sort of what people's opinions are, and whether or not the veracity of the license isn't really there's so many words have been written about that we don't have to explore in there. But it does sort of raise an interesting point, which is if I'm an open source maintainer, a lot of people maintain open source for a variety of reasons. Sometimes it's for it's a tool that helps somebody, and there's the altruistic side of, well, this helps me, maybe it helps somebody else. Some people need to but people still need to live, and people still need to pay bills and everything else. Some people's employers let them work on open source, which is awesome. But I guess I'm curious, how do you see the next 2, 4, 5, maybe 10 years? Are we gonna does open source sort of need to be redefined? How do we make sure that people who are writing the software and sort of graciously giving it away to people, how do we support them sort of as a unit?
I mean, that's a tough question, and I think that one of the things that comes up regularly, especially on the maintainers and what can we do, everyone's feeling, the topic of maintainer burnout has come up repeatedly, quite reasonably so. And companies like GitHub have trying to take actions to say, look, you can sponsor projects and make it easier for companies and individuals to sponsor and provide recurring cash flow to these projects that they depend on. But I think one of the challenges here is that many open source projects are labors of love. They're side projects, they're hobby projects, they're things that people have created because they're interested in it. They're not doing it. The project wasn't getting created with a commercial purpose in there. And I think that's a very key distinction here is that open source is not a business model. As much as people maybe want it to be, it's, today it's not. I mean, it's a means to an end. If you look at why is Microsoft doing open source? We're not selling the product. We're selling Azure. We want the cloud services, right? Please, put your stuff on Azure. We'll have the best cloud out there. We want to sell you storage and compute and make that as easy to consume and as possible. The technology and the tools are a way to enable you to build those solutions that run on our cloud. And that is the open source is not the part that we're selling there. You look at Kubernetes. Nobody's buying a Kubernetes, not really. Google is selling GCP in their cloud services. Other companies that are putting resources into the Kubernetes ecosystem maybe have their own tools and products and services that they're selling that are based on it.
Yeah.
In all these cases, the ones you mentioned, Mongo and Elastic, they have a product or a service that they are trying to sell that is based on their core tool. But as they've discovered, the product itself isn't the key thing that they can sell. No one's going to pay for MongoDB, the code, right?
Yeah.
And you have companies like Amazon that, as you said, they'll have their own hosted MongoDB service, and now you have to say, well, what's the difference?
Yeah.
But it's
just
business cases.
It's a challenge.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's hard too because, I like to write software. I like to build stuff, but I don't have a business mind, right? To think of if I go and build this software, what are the potential ways that other people could use it for commercial gain? Or do I want to try to capitalize on the commercial side of it myself before I want other people to be able to do that? Like, do I want first mover and all that sort of question, all those sorts of questions? And I think, especially like you said, if there are a lot of these projects start as labors of love. They don't start as commercial software, and a lot of them don't start as commercial grade software, but they become commercial grade once there's a sort of critical mass of users, and people say, "Well, I'm using this in my project, and I can contribute this," and it just seems like yeah, it almost seems like I've made this licensing decision early, and I'm stuck with it until we go and pull an Elastic or a Mongo, and we flip a bunch of people over what they're working on, and suddenly we change the license, and now there's and it feels like a minefield.
I'm not sure that works for most products though, or most projects. I think something like the SSPI or L, whatever, works or may work. Whether it does or not remains to be seen. By products, Mongo is a product. It's not a library. For all the libraries that are out there, are people really going to pay for that? And I think that you saw that, once upon a time they did. The component vendor space was huge, right?
Yep.
For Windows components and libraries. And, I don't have specific data on that, but I'm fairly sure that has been stagnant for a while as certain niche areas like UX controls, companies may purchase licenses for, because there's no perceived open source alternatives for it,
right.
And they want the support that goes with it. But for an average library, like, I don't know, I've wrote ZeroConf a number of years ago, which is a Bonjour MDNS library that helps discover devices on a network. It was one of these things, I did it because I needed it for a side project at the time, but other folks found it useful, and I believe I've seen support issues on the repo from HP at one point, looking to help it discover their printers and some software. And I know that the Xamarin tools use it in their Xamarin for iOS. Like, my library is distributed as part of Visual Studio, which is cool, but I don't see anything for it.
Sure.
It's just, all right, it's there.
Right.
So it's this, libraries are not products, so I'm not sure what I would do to say, hey, if I wanted to say, give me a few bucks for this, for what?
Yeah, I guess, and that is hard, because, it isn't a turnkey product you go download to use. And, I haven't seen any sort of component type things that you can download, like a tool, like a UI thing, like a Telerik controls or Infragistics or whoever. The last time I used one, I remember, it was a place I used to work. They did banking software. So, it's already 900-year-old code anyway. And they had this Infragistics grid control, and they absolutely loved it because you could hit export to PDF, and it would export the entire grid to PDF, and it would go fetch the other data out of the database for you, and they loved it. And that was why they bought it, because it provided a ton of value. But no, I think there's an interesting sort of pivot there, which is, am I building turnkey software, or am I building a library that helps me in one of my projects that I like to go and release, right?
What I would like to see is, and this is, I've started giving some talks on this are studies that show that teams that contribute back to open source products are more productive on the applications that they're actually building. And I think that when you ask most project maintainers of what they want, yeah, I mean, money's nice in some cases. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'd like to have some extra lattes or something, right? Or, some good scotch. I won't say no to that. But yeah, that's not going to really help me, because the bigger issue for me and for many folks is not the money one, but the time one.
Yeah.
Maintaining libraries takes time. If you want feature requests, the question is, that's my time, and I have to decide. We started earlier. How was your weekend? What did you do? Am I going to dedicate any of that time to that open source project, or am I going to do something else? And I've made peace with the fact that, I'm going to do whatever I want, and the open source projects will get the time when I feel like it. But that's not an easy thing to do, because there's a lot of pressure people put on themselves. They say, look, I have all these issues coming in. I have to be responsive, and I have to, get these fixes out there. And that's where I think a lot of the burnout happens. The money's not going to change that.
Yeah.
Unless it's enough money that it can replace a job. So, I mean, I think there's a few dollars here and there's nice. But what would really help is you need enough to replace full employment, potentially, which is a very far cry from what sponsors is likely going to do for most people. And instead, what I would like to see is that I'd like to see companies donating their time back. I think that's what I've heard maintainers really want. Instead of filing that issue, oh, there's a bug here, here, and here, or I'd like this feature, well, do that, and then tell me, we'll work with you to help fix it or implement it.
Yeah. Well, I think that's
PR is accepted.
Well, you see a lot of that. Like, you see a lot of, it's kind of funny because on Twitter, somebody will post, an overly entitled issue that they've received or whatever, and of course, everybody looks at that, it's like, oh my god, and it's funny because it's like who actually believes that this is how you should talk to other people? But the problem is that on the other end of that is a maintainer who's feeling like, what do I do about this, right? Like, this is obviously, I feel like I need to help because I felt like I needed to release this in the first place because it was useful for me and I want it to be useful for other people, and it's not useful for somebody, and I feel this sort of urge to go and to either help, fix, etc. And I would 100% agree that it's a time issue, and the fact that there are so many businesses that are relying on open source, have taken like hard dependencies on it, that are shipping their own software that they're selling either internally or externally with it. But there doesn't seem to be, how do we compel those kinds of companies to say you can absolutely contribute back? Like, maybe it's reporting that shows, or studies that show that our software quality or our developer productivity goes up when folks are contributing. I don't know, but it's just seems like a hard problem to solve.
It's hard, but I think we have to keep trying on that message. I think that one of the challenges with some of the sponsorship, like especially in some of the lower amounts, there's this kind of perverse effect that may not be expected, where that may make burnout pressure worse, because now there's money on the line. People are feeling like they're expected to, I have to now fix this because people are donating and paying me to do this.
Yep.
But they still don't have the time that they need. So a little bit of money, but it may just increase that pressure that people put on themselves.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and it increases the level of entitlement of people who already felt entitled to a fix, or felt entitled to get their fix out, 2 days ago. Now they're going to feel even worse. Well, I donated to your project. It's like, well, you donated.
I don't know. I mean, if we can work on showing the financial incentives. Like, look, we know businesses are ultimately looking for a business case. We need to show them and continue to work on data that says, hey, here's why it's in your best interests to allow your developers to spend X amount of time contributing back. And I think it is numbers like, hey, your team is more productive. They learn more skills. Your application is better. You get defects fixed quicker in aggregate. There's a lot of things that we can make I think, a quite compelling business case, but it's a message. We have to just keep shouting and getting it to the right folks so that they can hear it and internalize it.
Maybe
And of course, make it easy to get started.
Yeah, maybe it's a cultural thing as well, right? Get young developers or students to start contributing and seeing the benefits of open source, and that in effect will become a part of their culture. When they join a company, they can also force that cultural change, because there's been a lot of pushback from companies even using open source, because obviously they don't want to get into the hot waters, or they don't want to maintain, or they don't support. So we've seen a lot of developers starting to realize the benefits of open source, but they're either stuck in a company that doesn't want to support them in that effort, or they haven't had this cultural change that they can see the benefits of open source. And we need to do better, I think, in educating developers overall.
Absolutely.
I didn't mean to ambush you with that one, because I know that we hadn't mentioned that before, but it just, I don't know. It's always been an interesting one for me in terms of how people can, just how you make it sustainable, because I derive so much value from it, and I don't feel like I necessarily contribute a whole lot back. I mean, I do think about 10, 12 years ago of something's broken, and I have to remember a simple server, or hope that somebody shipped a PDB or something to fix it, and being able to go out and just look at the code and say, oh, here's a fix, or here's something I think should fix this.
Yep.
So I mean, totally changes the workflow.
It's the classical economic free rider problem. Like, we see this on our infrastructure all the time. Never mind software, but how many times have you read that the bridges, or how many percentage of the bridges are past their inspection dates? Like, are you thinking about that on every bridge you cross and wonder if this is going to be the time it collapses? Like, I think we're not. But the roads is the classic free rider problem, and where it's always somebody else. We all benefit from it, but nobody wants to pay for it. Software isn't that much different in that respect.
Yeah, and we have people like Brian Lagunas on Microsoft Developer talking about Burnout, right? He's an avid open source maintainer. He's a good friend as well, and I know Brian. So it's a real thing. People that write software for other people do feel the challenge there when it comes to adding features or fixing bugs.
Absolutely.
I mean, I remember before I had kids, I would, occasionally on the weekends, I might go build something, I might go write something to solve my own problems or whatever, and then I had children, and so my entire weekends are completely gone, and not until at least until they're older. But we did have one question from earlier when you mentioned that you wear two hats. Robertables wants to know how hard it is to fit in the frame of a Zoom or a team meeting when you're wearing multiple hats.
I don't know. I'll squish down. I'll try to make it sure it fits in there.
And you mentioned SSPI, which is is that we've covered our identity checkbox for today, so that's awesome. I have one more question for you, and then of course anything else that you like to share with us. So, architect, is architect a verb?
Both.
To architect.
Is it? But is it though?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I mean,
all right.
The act of architecting something is to design and plan it out, right?
Yeah, I know. I just don't. I can't get down with it. I don't know what it is. Every time somebody tells me that, we're architecting this right now, I'm just like, I have to go. Like that. Don't know I physically need to remove myself from the situation.
How about the word design?
Design is better. Yeah.
But I mean,
design is so much
different?
better.
But design and architect could be interchangeable in those expressions, right? I'm designing something right now to design something.
I'll tell you what, JP
totally
is a grumpy
fine.
old man. He's a grumpy old man, doesn't like to change his ways. And now that he's 36, he's even more entrenched into that mentality. Dude, people move on, language evolves. I can architect my solution on Azure. Done. Or AWS or Google Cloud.
I'm like getting hot. hearing it so many times in such a short window. It's like a short circuit. Like I don't know what to do with my brain.
Well, it's
Anyway,
your
so-
birthday today, so I can mess around. Yeah.
Clearly, that's what I need to do. Somebody needs to do it for me. So, okay. So, I guess maybe this is the real last question. Anything super cool you're working on that you wanna tell us about?
Sure.
Sure. So yeah, I'm actually working on a whole series of updates regarding secure supply chain, which I know has been a hot topic in the news lately. And this is around reproducible build validation. Some of the stuff has been on the .NET Designs blog, GitHub site, where we've posted some end-to-end scenarios. But the idea here is that you'll be able to take a binary created from NuGet or anywhere else, and run some tools that the Roslyn team is creating, and it'll verify that the source code that it has access to and can see is all of the ones that were used to generate the DLL file in a byte for byte, being byte for byte identical. And the idea here is that if there's a compromise on a build server, you'll be able to detect that and take mitigations towards that. And there's other things you might be able to do down the line, like patching. You might be able to take that DLL file with the PDB that you have, and you mentioned earlier, that one that was 14 years old. And, well, not for the purpose of this. We need some newer compilers to generate the data we need. But so after a certain point, going forward, all the DLLs will be able to be reproduced, and you could potentially put a binary, a source code fix in there and generate a new binary that you use in its place without needing the original code or without needing the original build system or build steps.
Oh, that is so cool. That is awesome.
So that initial hot patching isn't on the initial P0 release, but is something that we are looking at as a natural extension of what this can do. The reproducible part of saying, hey, look, you can verify this binary is what we're focusing in on for the initial release. And to that end, folks may have seen those package health checkboxes in NuGet Package Explorer. And that's really what this is all driving towards, is showing folks, hey, the symbols are there, it's built with the right build settings, and it's using a new enough compiler that is generating the right output in the PDB file that these tools can then read later to do this reproduction check.
Nice.
Oh, that is awesome. So I wonder too, would that help with the I could see, I guess, potentially helping with the I can't remember exactly the package confusion thing that's been going on with NPM and NuGet recently. There was a big sort of dust up when someone published package confusion with NPM, where they would essentially, we had internal names that were used and the external names weren't taken, and so somebody could go and squat them, right? Like, I guess, new age package squatting.
Yeah, and that's the SAMHSA vulnerability attack, whatever they described last month. Yep.
And so I would imagine something like this would help.
This doesn't specifically help with that. This is more about, attacks like LeftPad or SolarWinds, where you would be able to see the code that's running in a compromised system. So this by itself doesn't tell you, hey, this was clean. All it does is say, hey, all the code that's in this binary, we can see. Some tool then still needs to actually scan that. And there are lots of existing tools from security vendors that can perform static analysis on the code. The key is, are you looking at all of the code? And are you building, is all the code that's in there what you expected it to build?
Yep.
Maybe malware inserted yet a third source file from some other location. You say, I didn't expect that file to be there. And that could flag something. But the package dependency confusion attacks are a bit different, and that's something that people do need to be careful of and look at, because that could happen here in this case. This doesn't address that particular issue.
Okay. So universal package identity. It's really And yeah, okay. But, no, I get it. That makes sense. That's awesome. But so this whole idea of like hot patching and of knowing exactly what's running, I think it's super cool, super interesting too. So, well, I think I mean that's all we've got. We had a few questions. I think we sort of covered a whole lot of them. And what's your favorite part of .NET 6?
Favorite part of .NET 6? Well, I like the fact that I just had NuGet Package Explorer running on ARM64 with a flick of a switch. I mean,
nice.
So for all those people running the latest devices with low battery, with efficient batteries rather, now we can run natively there. There's so much good stuff coming. I like that all the Xamarin workloads are going to be built into the SDK, so it becomes easier to build and put together. Tons of goodies coming there.
Yeah. Is there anything coming out about .NET this week at Ignite, or are we going to save that for? That's going to be, I guess, at Build.
Build, I guess.
That I don't know. I'm sorry.
We'll have to wait and see then.
I guess we'll just have to watch all of Ignite and see. I mean, I'm sure if there's like a,
I hear Satya's kicking it off tomorrow, so, he's always fun to watch.
Which is a great segue because we'll be doing a live commentary show tomorrow from 8 to 11 to cover the keynote.
Yeah, as if you don't hear our bad opinions enough, you can also tune in to hear more bad opinions about people who have good ones. So it's perfect. Yeah. But Claire, thank you so much for taking an hour out of your morning and coming and hanging. Or I guess it's longer than an hour now. Taking time out of your morning to come and hang out with us. Go follow Claire on Twitter. Her Twitter tag thing is underneath her face down there at the bottom. If there's anybody that needs to get in touch, or if anybody has ideas about the foundation, I mean, there's the .NET Foundation website. Is there anything else? Are there any sort of like regular meetings or anything?
Subscribe to our newsletter. We send out a newsletter approximately every other month that has the latest goings on, and we also have our blog on our website. It's under the news section, and it links to our blog. That's probably the best way to stay apprised of what we're doing. You can follow the .NET Foundation's Twitter handle. We'll tweet out things that are relevant to the .NET open source community quite regularly. So plenty of ways to kind of stay on top of things.
All right. Awesome.
Yes.
Well, we'll make sure all the links we'll make sure we get all the links out in the blog post that follows this. We'll get them down in the chat. So we're going to be back tomorrow morning around 11 Eastern. Satya's big Ignite kickoff is tomorrow, so Christos and I are going to dress up like newsmen from the 70s and give terrible hot takes that people can take that people will troll us about forever. So now we got to figure out who we're going to go raid. Where are we going from here, everybody? Looks like
Child Coach is.
That looks like a good place to go. Let's go there. We could, I guess, Visual Studio's doing something too. And seeing as we've been talking about .NET all morning, we could go to Visual Studio. You want to do that?
You could do that too.
All right, let's go to Visual Studio. I don't know what's going on over on Visual Studio, but it looks like somebody's writing code, so that's a good start.
It's the .NET Docs
Party
today.
Crashers.
There you go.
The .NET Docs team. See, we could come up with a new URL for them. docs.net/docs or staging.docs.net. See, we just have to come up with everything. So, all right, everybody. Hey, we'll see you. See you all tomorrow. Claire, thank you so much for hanging out with us. And we're going to go over and see what Visual Studio is working on. See you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.